خاندان زهرا به بلندتر صلوات محمد و آل محمد
محمد و آل محمد صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ما عندكم ينفد وما عند الله باق صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. عظم الله وجورنا وجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. The topic that I have chosen for tonight's lecture is spiritual life and material life balance. For indeed, this is something which is often asked about, and it is something that concerns us all, because on the one hand, we are all Muslims and we are all striving to get closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But on the other hand, we happen to live in places where the values and the principles are not conducive for us sometimes to achieve that aim. The values and principles are aimed at achieving something else. And therefore this topic of spiritual life and material life balance is a very hot one and a very important one indeed, and concerns each and every one of us. In fact, even on the way here, we had that same discussion with regards to how we can, inshallah, try and get out of the rat race. How is it that so many people get caught up in the system which is geared towards achieving certain other aims? How can we break free and still make use of the dunya in order to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So this is a very important topic, inshallah, and we will discuss it in some depth. Hopefully by the end of this majlis, we'll have arrived at some practical tips as to how we can go about using the dunya, living in the dunya, but at the same time not allowing it to be an obstacle for us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, we will find that actually it is all about changing a mindset. The mindset that we might have at the moment to a mindset that must be kept by all of us if we are going to progress spiritually and develop, inshallah, as true mu'mineen and followers of Abu Abdullah and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So now, let's look at this in a little bit more detail. When we talk about balance, usually what's the image that comes to our mind? The image that comes to our mind is that you have, for example, two separate things. You are trying to balance two things which are mutually exclusive to one another. So on the one hand, you might have an object, let's say some fruit, in that very typical type of image, like in the olden days, they would have fruit on the one side and perhaps a type of weight, a stone, wherever it might be, 1 kilo, 2 kilos on the other side. Are they connected in any way? They are not. They are mutually exclusive to one another. The fruit is one thing and the weight is another thing. And then the person tries to see, can he attain some type of equilibrium between the two? Can he try to balance the two and then come up with the price and so on and so forth? So that's one way of looking at what balance is all about. Now, with regards to material life and spiritual life, is it like that? Is it that the material life is one thing, spiritual life is another thing? They are exclusive, there is no connection between the two, and then we are trying to balance them? Is that the way that we are living our lives? Let's just ask ourselves this question for the time being. So, some people say that we have a time and a place for religion, we have a time and a place for spirituality, and we have a time and a place for materialism. Is that the correct model for us? So, if it is the night of Qadr, for example, yes, that is a night of worship. That is not a night of consumerism, materialism, or a place. We go for ziyarah. That is a place for worship. That is a place where we need to strive to get closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or at the time of prayer and so on and so forth. Whereas other times we are pursuing consumer things or materialistic things. So that is one model. They are separate from one another. They are not connected. However, what if we change our mindset and we do not look at them as being mutually exclusive? What if we say that actually both of them are intrinsically linked with one another? So it is not a matter of two things. It is one thing. It is the life of a mu'min living in this world, and therefore there is a complete combination all the time in every place between the material life and the spiritual life. Is that a doable model? Is that something that we can achieve? So let's have a look at this in some detail, inshallah. Now, what I'd like you to all do is it's just an experiment, and then inshallah we'll visit this at the end as well. I'd like you all, inshallah, to just fold your arms. Everyone has to do it, I'm afraid. Okay? Right, now, just have a look. Which arm is on top and which arm is on bottom? Alright? Now, fold your arms the other way round, so that that arm which was on the bottom now becomes on the top. How does that feel? Feels a bit strange, feels a bit uncomfortable, right? Why? Because you are not used to it. From day one, since you learned how to fold your arms, you were always doing it in a particular way. That's what you're used to. Now when you are asked to do it the other way around, it seems strange. It seems a bit weird, because you haven't developed that habit. So what this is all about is trying to change that mindset, trying to change our habits so that we do and we can do something different which we are not used to. Let me give you an example. In the holy month of Ramadan, how are we usually in the holy month of Ramadan? Do we look at our spiritual life as being separate to our material life, or do we see them as being intrinsically connected? It is definitely the second. Why? Because when we are fasting, we are abstaining from food and drink and all those other things. Does life stop? Sometimes we wish we didn't have to go to work, right, in Ramadan. Sometimes we wish we didn't have to go to school. But still we do. We have to go to work. We have to go to school. But at the same time, we are fasting. We are in an increased spiritual state, and yet we are living our day-to-day lives in the same way. We are not cutting back on any of our daily activities, generally speaking. So what is that telling us? That's telling us we can be in a state of spirituality, a high level of spirituality even, because in Ramadan we are always conscious of certain things. We are conscious of the fact that we can't eat, we can't drink, we can't do this, we can't do that. Even what we look at, how we think, what we say, we are very vigilant, we are very careful about all these things. So why in Ramadan only? There we have a complete combination of spirituality and material life. We are still going out and earning money, we are still going out shopping, we are still doing this, we are still doing that, but we are in that state of spirituality that comes around every year. So what if we continue in that same way with regards to all of our aspects of our lives at all times? So just bear that in mind for now. So now what I'd like to do is put forward, inshallah, like I've been trying to do in all the majalis that we've had so far, some practical steps, some practical guidelines as to how our interaction with the dunya should be. So at the same time that we are interacting, we are also always rising closer and closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I'd like to put forward 3 guidelines in this regard. How we should interact with the dunya so that it does not act as an obstacle to our spiritual progression. In fact, it can help us to get closer to Allah. The first guideline is that we must see the dunya, we must regard the world as a means to an end and not an end in itself. What that means is that the dunya, the world, the material world, is not our objective. It is not the ultimate aim that we should all be striving for. There is that wonderful, beautiful saying from Rasul al-A'zam sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where he says, "Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah." The dunya is the plantation for the hereafter. What does that mean? It means that we will reap whatever we sow. Just like with the farmer in his plantation, what is the aim of a farmer? Is it that land? It's not the land. It's the crops that will finally grow on that land and he'll be able to sell them and benefit from that. It's not the land itself. So the world is that land. But it is not our aim. The aim is the crops, meaning the reward, inshallah. Whatever we reap, we sow in the akhirah. So that's the first thing. We always bear in mind, this is not the end. It is the means to an end. Just like the farmer earns a living by means of his plantation, the crops that he sells are really the main objective for the farmer. Now, when we say that it is the means to an end, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He has created everything for us. In Surah Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse number 29, Allah tells us, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. He is the one, referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has created for you, O mankind, everything on the earth. So now, when everything has been created for us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is that telling us? Whenever we have any blessing, whenever we have any divine mercy showered upon us, it means that we must therefore act responsibly with regards to it. Our responsibility also increases. So, with any creation, say for example you are not familiar with something that has been made. What do you need? You have to refer to an instruction manual. You always need to see how are you going to use that thing. This microphone system, there will always be an instruction manual that comes with it. This is a simple human creation, and yet still we have to refer to guidelines and guidance and experts, the creator of it, in order to use it properly. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He has created everything for us on the earth, it means that we must also refer to an instruction manual. What is that instruction manual? That instruction manual for us to be able to use all the divine blessings that Allah has created for us is the Quran and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. It is the Thaqalain. And therefore, when we say the dunya is the plantation for the akhirah, yes, but we must use it in its correct way according to the wishes of the Creator. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, what I'd like to do is analyze what is meant by the dunya. Often, the dunya itself gets a bad rep, right? The dunya gets a very bad publicity and we think that it is all bad. But let me ask you, where did the great prophets live? Where did the great imams live? Where did the great awliya and saints live? How were they able to get so close to Allah? Did they live in a separate place to us? They lived in the same place. So how is it they were able to use the dunya in its correct way? Now, we have this wonderful tradition from Imam Zainul Abidin sallallahu wa sallam alayhi, where he analyzes the dunya in the following way. He says, actually the dunya is not just one thing. The dunya is of two types. A dunya, dunya'an. The dunya is of two types. Dunya balagh wa dunya mal'una. That means the first type is the dunya balagh. That means the dunya which is which is a means for us to attain success, meaning to attain success in the akhirah, right? So that's one dunya. The other dunya though is the mal'una. It is the cursed world, right? It is the cursed material world. So now it tells us that there is a positive way of looking at the dunya and using the dunya, and there is a negative way. Let's take this a bit further. You might have heard about Allama Majlisi, Muhammad Baqir Majlisi. He is the author of that great work, Biharul Anwar, right? Biharul Anwar translates as the seas of lights. And the reason why it's called Biharul Anwar is because it is our largest collection of traditions from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. How many volumes is it? 110 volumes of the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Inshallah, during the course of these majalis, it's good also to become a little bit acquainted with the great ulama that have provided us with such great works as well. So, Allama Majlisi, he compiles this with his students. It took them over 30 years. It's a life's work, compiling and gathering all the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt so that they would be preserved. Now, in this great work of his, he explains what this means, that the dunya is of two types. He says that, the dunya, don't think it is one thing only, that for everyone it'll be the same thing. He says the dunya is whatever prevents someone from obeying Allah. Whatever is, now, this is something that we should all reflect on. What is our dunya? My dunya might be different to yours. What is it that is preventing me from obeying Allah? That's my dunya. Your dunya might be different. Let's all reflect on this for a moment. What is our dunya? Now, the amazing thing is, sometimes we might think about certain activities or certain things that we probably associate with the akhirah, but that could be our dunya. Let me give you some examples. Knowledge. Knowledge is such a recommended thing in Islam. We hear so many commendations about knowledge and so on and so forth. Is knowledge a dunyawi thing or an ukhrawi thing? Is it something for this world or the akhirah? Usually we would say knowledge is fantastic. We must all go after knowledge. Utlubul ilm wal obiseen, and seek knowledge even if it's in China and so on and so forth. This is incumbent on everyone. However, if someone with knowledge, if that is preventing him from getting closer to Allah, from obeying Allah, so he's using that knowledge not for the sake of humanity, not for enabling him and others to get closer to Allah, but for trying to achieve some station amongst the people. He is using that simply to earn loads of money. That's his dunya. So knowledge, which is supposed to be such a great thing in Islam, becomes that person's dunya. Similarly, giving in the way of Allah. We hear so much about giving sadaqah and infaq and this and that. You give sadaqah, but if that person's intention is, oh, you know what, I want people to know how much I'm giving. He might be giving for a mosque, for a madrasa, he might be giving for some relief work being done in Syria, wherever it might be. But if his intention is that, you know what, I just want people to know that, you know, I give in the way of Allah, that becomes his dunya. That is not going to get him closer to Allah. So for everyone, it's different. Let's turn it on its head. Working, earning a living, is that dunya or is it akhirah? We might think that, oh, it's money, it's earning things. But if the person's aim and intention is that with this money, I'm simply going to acquire more and more wealth for myself and not put it to any decent purpose, not put it towards supporting my family for the sake of Allah, right? For the sake of Allah, that's the key thing. Then that is definitely his dunya. But what if somebody earns a living and he earns with the intention that, oh Allah, you have instructed me to earn money so that I can provide for myself and my family. This is a divine duty. So that I can help others with any surplus. So that I can progress the education of my children. So that I can increase where my community is spiritually and educationally and socially. I'm doing it for the sake of myself and my fellow human beings because you have told me to do this. Then there's absolutely no problem in earning that money. In fact, that becomes his akhirah. What you might think that was a dunyawi thing, a worldly thing, becomes his akhirah. So it is not the thing itself. We must understand it is not spending, earning, acquiring knowledge, giving in the way of Allah, whatever it might be. It is how we use it. This is the beautiful explanation put forward by Allama Majlisi in Bihar al-Anwar. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In fact, one day, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alayhi heard somebody condemning the dunya, the world, right, the material world. You know what he does? Amir al-Mu'mineen starts saying so many good things about the world. He says that, you know, the world is a place of worship for the lovers of Allah. The world is a place of prayer for the angels of Allah. The world is a place where wahi and revelation was sent down. Where was it sent down to? To the Holy Prophet. It was sent down to the world. He says the world is a marketplace. A marketplace for who? For the saints of Allah. The awliya of Allah, he says they use the dunya to attain Allah's pleasure and to acquire paradise. With the Ahlul Bayt, the prophets, the saints of Allah, the great ulama, how do they attain paradise without living in the dunya? They do, but they do it in a particular way. Another example, Nabi Sulaiman. Nabi Sulaiman in the Quran, when we read, doesn't he own a huge kingdom? And yet he is one of the great prophets. Everything is in his hands. He has command over the weather as well. Everything is in his hands. And how is he still one of the great prophets? How about our own prophet, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? And Mawla Amir, when they were ruling the Muslim Ummah, Imam Ali for a short period of time at least was the ruler of the Muslim Ummah, as was the Holy Prophet. The reason why they were still able to progress spiritually, all of that power, all of that wealth that they had at their disposal, it was only for one thing: to establish divine values, to establish divine laws, and to fight injustices and wrong. That's it. I'll give you an example. This is mentioned in Nahj Balagha. Just before Sermon 33 starts, it talks about an incident that takes place when Amir al-Mu'mineen is about to go for war against the people of Basra in the Battle of Jamal. Okay? He gets to a place called Dhiqar. At this place, Ibn Abbas comes to him, Abdullah ibn Abbas comes to him, and he sees Mawla Amir stitching up his own shoe. Allahu Akbar. The leader of the people, the ruler of the people, you tell me how many rulers you know who would do this. Stitch up their own shoes, right? So, he's stitching up his own shoes. Abdullah ibn Abbas comes to him. Mawla Amir holds up the shoe and he says to him, Ibn Abbas, how much is this shoe worth? And he replies, it has no value. What does Imam Ali reply to him? He says, by Allah, this shoe would have more value to me than my rule over you, were it not for the fact that by means of my rule over you, I can establish what is right and I can ward off what is wrong. That's what's important for Mawla Amir, ruling over the people. It has no value, it is of even less value than that old shoe. But he knows that through this power he has, through this position he has, he can establish right and ward off wrong. That's the only reason why he wants to do that. Not so that he can attain some type of power and wealth and position in society. So these are the examples of how these great people were able to use the dunya as a mazra'ah, as a plantation for the akhirah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So that's the first guideline, that we use the dunya as a means to an end, not an end in itself. Now, the second practical guideline, inshallah, is that we must not be attached to worldly things. Having worldly things, being attached to worldly things are two different things. How can we live in this world without worldly things? Can anyone do that? Are we expected to go on top of a mountain and seclude ourselves? Of course not. We need worldly things to live, right? Now, the key difference is though, is exactly what our sixth holy Imam tells us. He says, Ra'su kulli khati'a hubbud dunya. The fountainhead, meaning the major cause of every mistake, is hubbud dunya. And very significantly, is love for the world. He doesn't say it is ad-dunya. He doesn't say it is the worldly things. He says hubbud dunya, meaning love for the world. It is that love and attachment to it that is very detrimental. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he himself says, فَقَطِّئُوا عَلَائِكَ الدُّنْيَا. Sever your attachments to the world. It's okay having worldly things. We need these things. But is our heart tied to it or not? I'll give you an example why this is so detrimental to us. You know, we hear all the time that when the soul leaves the body, it is a painful experience, right? When the soul finally leaves the body and goes to the akhirah, there is that pain. You know what that pain is? Especially for non-believers or those who are material in their outlook. You know what that pain is? Imagine an elastic band, right? A piece of elastic, we call them elastic bands, right? So, imagine one of those. Now, how far can you stretch an elastic band? Right? You can only stretch it so much, and then what will happen? That is the pain. When someone's soul is attached to the dunya, what happens is the soul wants to go to the next life, right? The body stays here, it gradually disintegrates, but the soul is everlasting. It goes to Allah. However, that soul, let's say that person's soul was attached to the dunya, was attached to his car, was attached to his house, was attached to whatever it was, that knowledge which was not being used in the right way, that experience, that wealth, whatever it was. So now what happens? That person's soul is going, it wants to go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is attached to the worldly things. Those worldly things are not going to go with it. It's like that elastic band. The elastic band, when you stretch it, what does it naturally want to do? It wants to go back to its normal position, isn't it? It doesn't want to be stretched. That soul wants to go back to its position it was in, because it's attached to the dunyawi things. But unfortunately, there's no stopping the soul going towards Allah. There's absolutely no stopping us keep on pulling it. It wants to go back into its normal shape. Eventually, what will happen? It will snap. That stretching of the soul between it going towards Allah and its attachment, and then finally that snap, that is the pain. That is the absolute severe pain that the person will feel when his or her soul leaves the body and goes to the next world. So now, what we must do is make sure that while we are alive, it is okay and we absolutely need things to live on, worldly things, but we must not be attached. If it was going to go tomorrow, would we cry and weep and bang our heads and mourn those things or not? Would we say that, okay, Alhamdulillah, it was all Allah's blessings in the first place. Whatever we have, we're only temporary custodians of this stuff. So if Allah wants to take it back, it's His anyway. If somebody was to give you their mobile and they say, this is yours to look after, can you go and sell it? Can you do what you like with it? You can't. It's your amana. It's a type of object deposited with you, and you must use it in its right way. And if you were to sell it, you'll be doing a great injustice and sin. It's the same way with the dunya. We are only temporarily custodians of what we have. It belongs to Allah. If that person was to say to you, oh, can you give it to Ahmed? You have to give it to Ahmed. You can't give it to Ali. In the same way, when Allah tells us, I'm giving you this on a temporary basis, I want you to use it here. I want you to use it there. We can't complain about it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now, if our hearts are not going to be attached to the dunya, so what are our hearts naturally attached to? And what should they be attached to? I'd like to illustrate this by quoting something by the famous poet Jalaluddin Rumi. I said some nights ago that inshallah, because we have some Persian speakers here, from time to time I might bring in some Persian, and I haven't fulfilled this commitment up to now, so tonight's the night, for those of you who know Persian. So Jalaluddin Rumi, he explains this beautifully. You know his major work, his magnus opus is the Masnavi Ma'navi, okay? And the very opening couplets of Masnavi is known as the lament of the reed flute, right? I don't know if you've ever seen, in the Iranian culture in particular, you have what is called the ney. The ney is a flute, it's an instrument which is made out of reeds, okay? So they cut off the reed from the river banks, they put holes in it and it's blown. Those of you who know about this, I know some brothers, they definitely know about it, you will know that it has a very particular sound. It has a very melancholic, sad sound, okay? When it's blown and it's played. What Jalaluddin Rumi says in the opening couplets of his Masnavi is Beshno az ne chun hikayat mikonad, az judai ha shikayat mikonad. What that means is, listen to the flute as it complains of its separation. as it tells of its complaints of its separation. Now, what is going on here? What is this all about? Jalaluddin Rumi is actually putting forward a very deep and profound metaphor. It is symbolic of the origin of the soul. Let me explain it in this way. The ney, the flute, when it is blown, it has this sad sound. What Jalaluddin Rumi is saying is that when it is blown and played, it is actually crying. It is complaining. It is complaining of its separation from its origin. What was its origin? Those marshes where those reeds were growing quite happily on the banks of the river. What happened? Somebody came along, cut off those marshes, made one of them into this flute, and now that flute, when it is being played, it is crying and complaining about its separation. This is symbolic. This is a metaphor to say that all of us as human beings, we are constantly crying, we are constantly complaining of our separation from our origin. Our origin is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where our real attachment is, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All these other materialistic things are very insignificant and poor substitutes for our real attachment, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, when we are going after materialistic things, we are denying and we are somehow trying to cloud over that connection between us and our origin. So now, once we've understood that, therefore we know what we must attach ourselves to. In the Quran, in that verse that I recited at the beginning of this lecture, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Nahl, verse number 96, مَا عِنْدَكُمْ يَنْفَدْ وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. That means that whatever is with you will not last. Whatever is with you will come to an end. What is with Allah will last. It is baqi, it will last. So, what this is telling us therefore, what must we attach our hearts to? What if it's not the dunya? We must attach our hearts to those things which will be with Allah, which will be lasting. Meaning, the teachings of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt, even using the dunya in its correct sense, in its correct way, so that it is lasting. When we go to the akhirah, it will be something that comes with us. It won't be left behind. Because whatever comes with us will last. Whatever is just attained for the sake of the dunya will be left behind. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now, let's look at another and final way. It keeps coming down. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Let's look at the final guideline in regards to how we should interact with the dunya. The third and final guideline is that we must exercise moderation. So, sometimes we are very tempted, in particular, like I said at the beginning, in the society that we live in, the lifestyle, that rat race that I mentioned before, that system that we can sometimes get caught into, it kind of wants to push us towards the consumerism type of culture, the buy, otherwise you will die type of culture, right? If you don't have the latest, you are not the greatest, all of that kind of stuff, right? So, what do we do in such a situation? Exercising moderation. Not going over the top with anything. Our religion is a religion of balance. So, we get what we need. But sometimes there's a massive difference between what we need and what we want. Think about that. What we want is something, what we need is something else. So, let's try our best to suffice and be content with less. That should be the motto. Suffice with less. Be content with less. Do not be exuberant in your spending, and do not overdo the buying and purchasing of worldly items. Any extra things we can give in the way of Allah. Any extra surplus, wealth, money that we have, we can always find better uses for them. And inshallah, that will all come back to us, inshallah. Where do we get this from? None other than the words of Mawla Amir salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. In the Nahj Balagha. So all of these guidelines, as you can see, it's all from the Quran and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. In the Nahj Balagha, he says, La tas'alu fiha fawqa al-kafaf. What that means is, don't ask in it. He's talking about the dunya. Don't ask in the dunya, don't ask the dunya for that which is more than sufficient for your means of living. Is this kafar for you, right? Why ask more? Suffice with what you have, and inshallah, that will be the best thing for you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always provide, inshallah. So as a summary, inshallah, with regards to this whole issue of the balance between spiritual life and the material life, first of all, we saw that they do not have to be looked at as two mutually exclusive things. You got spiritual life and dunyavi life. Just like we experience in Ramadan, we must live and be spiritual. Live in this world, but constantly be spiritual. And it can be done as we show ourselves in Ramadan, how we are fasting and all the rest of it, but still going to work and school. The three guidelines that we put forward here with regards to our correct interaction with the dunya. First of all, must use the dunya as a means to an end, not an end in itself. Secondly, we must not attach our souls and hearts to worldly things. And thirdly, we must exercise moderation in our spending. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله صلى الله عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. Please recite with me. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. Karbala presents us with a whole range of role models. We have role models who are very young in age, and we have role models who are very old in age. A whole range of great warriors, from a 6-month-old baby to a very old man with white hair and white beard. Tonight we salute and we pay tribute to and we remember the great sacrifices of someone who represented the older generation, Habib ibn Muzahir. Habib ibn Muzahir, he was a loyal companion of the father of Imam Hussein. He was a loyal companion of the brother of Imam Hussein. In our traditions, he is described as someone who was pious, who was learned, and who was someone very respected. Now, on the day of Ashura, just imagine the image that we see of Habib ibn Muzahir. Look how he is described in the Maqtals and in the narrations of the martyrdoms of all the Shuhada of Karbala. It is reported that Habib ibn Muzahir, let's just picture this old, pious, radiant-faced man is coming out to battle with a sword in his hand. His hair is white, his beard is white. My brothers and sisters, fighting. Old people are exempt from fighting. The sick are exempt. Women and children are exempt. But no, Habib ibn Muzahir, he himself wants to defend Abu Abdullah. He insists on fighting. So when he comes out, he describes himself to the people. These battle cries, my brothers and sisters, that these great warriors cried out when they went out into the battle. They tell us a lot about their character. They tell us a lot about their faith and conviction. He comes out to fight. He says, if you don't know me, let me tell you who I am. He says, Ana Habibun wa Abi Muzahir. I am Habib and my father is Muzahir. Farisu Hijaa wa Harbun Tus'ar. I am a horseman of battle. When the fire of the war has been kindled, he is putting fear in the hearts of the enemy soldiers with his battle cries. This great old man, he comes out with sword in his hand, and now somebody shoots him. Habib ibn Muzahir falls on the ground. Then somebody hits him with a sword, and then somebody stabs him with a spear. Habib falls on the ground. He tries to get up. Another person hits him on the head with a sword. Habib falls on the sands of Karbala on his face. The white beard is now covered with the sands of Karbala. How can they do this to such an old, pious person? When he falls, another man comes up to him. He grabs his white hair and then he severs his head. Look how the Maktal narrator says what happened to Abu Abdullah. When that happens, the narrator says, فَهَدَّى مَقْتَلُهُ الْحُسَيْنِ. The killing of Habib crushed Hussein. Imam Hussein carries on repeating this verse, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And now Abu Abdullah, we see he is distraught at the killing of Habib, but the tragedy doesn't end there, my brothers and sisters. It is reported that in the streets of Kufa, a young boy was seen running after a horse. This horse had a rider who had tied a head to the horse, and he was dragging this head along the streets of Kufa. When this boy was seen running behind this horse, everyone thought, what is happening here? Who is he? Eventually the rider, he notices this boy. He asks him, he says, what are you doing following me? What do you want? He says, nothing, I don't want anything. He says, no, tell me you do want something. He says, the head that you are dragging on the streets of Kufa is the head of my father. Will you give it back to me so that I can bury it? But look at the depravity of the people of Umar ibn Sa'd. He says that no, for the governor is not happy for it to be buried, and I will receive a massive reward for killing your father. But my brothers and sisters, they didn't only desecrate the heads of Habib ibn Muzahir, they also desecrated the heads of all the other shuhada. But what was the difference? The difference was that instead of tying it to a horse and dragging it along, they placed their heads on tops of spears. And instead of the young boy looking up helplessly, it was the women and the children of the shuhada who had to look on helplessly at the heads. فسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم إنا نسألك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الجل الأكرم. يا الله 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 يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. Oh Allah, through the intercession of all the shuhada and usara of Karbala, we beseech you that you accept the following prayers. O Allah, enable us to always use the dunya in the best possible way to get closer to you. O Allah, enable us to always live and die with the wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. O Allah, enable everyone attending this community and this great center to flourish, inshaAllah. O Allah, enable all those who are facing relief around the world, all those who are facing difficulty around the world to attain relief. O Allah, forgive us and our forefathers for our sins. And O Allah, our last but not least prayer is that you hasten the appearance of our Imam, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajul Sharif. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.